I find it truly interesting how we have and what we do and why we are the way we are. And you know, I was raised up basically going to church sporadically between grandmother coming to get us and taking us to church, and my grandmother has played a major role in my spiritual development. And not only that, but I want to heal myself, you know, and you know this concept, save your soul, you know, and bless their soul. And what is a soul? You know, back in the old days, back in my rebel days, you know, and Saturday mornings you get a knock at the door, and these people with suits and ties on, and we're here for your soul. So I took my shoe off and gave them one of them. They said, not that soul, so I took the other one off and gave them the other one. That's a joke. But what is the soul? You know, I've helped a lot of people in my life, and I've experienced pretty amazing experiences in my life. About 2.5 years ago, I started volunteering downtown Oklahoma City at a local church. In this local church, they would help homeless people, people who have just came out of prison, who are crack addicts, drug addicts, cons, murderers. People have been prostituting themselves. And it's amazing when I can sit in front of somebody, and as I listen to their stories, it's amazing that it always starts back at the beginning. Do you realize that? And when you begin to understand that my concept is there are no broken people, but there are people who operate from broken, hurt ideas. And when I started to understand this, and I'm working with individuals, and no wonder why. No wonder why that they've sold themselves on the street for a fix to numb the pain that they suffered most of their life. But what is the soul? It's a really a great question. What is the soul? I mean, no one really knows. You know, we have our concepts, and they want to save your soul. You know, here it is, this person who's been beaten sexually and physically, emotionally abused as a child, growing up and through their entire life, and been in prison and imprisoned, held down and injected with drugs when they were like 13 or 14 years old. And then you wonder why their life is the way it is. But are they bad people? Are they broken? What is the language of the soul? That's a question. What is the language of the soul? Now, all of us, we all want a better life. Isn't that true? I mean, that's absolutely true. And I've heard many people say, you know what, Robert, you know, after I've seen somebody else's lives, my life is really pretty good. Still depressed. Still feel horrible about my life. I'm still unhappy. So I began to understand that obviously you take this little bitty baby who comes into this world, and they're installed in this environment, whatever the environment is. Mom's a prostitute, dad's a pimp, or dad's not there. She's the youngest, or he's the youngest of all the kids. All the kids are angry. They're bitter. They beat her up. They beat him up. Mom didn't want any more kids. She was an accident. 39 years old. I don't want any more kids. And she gave this child to the brothers and sisters who didn't want her either. And as this child takes in all this information, takes it all in, I believe inside this little bitty baby, this little kid, there's something inside this child trying to help her or him survive. Now, I believe that this presence is divine. I believe that this presence is there to guide and protect this child based on the environment. Now, you take another child who was back in Cambodia, and death is everywhere, anger is everywhere, And then we will hear stories of a young boy who'll go into high school with a machine gun and kill people. But when you go back to this little boy, and he's been angry, and his parents didn't want him, and he was on antidepressants, and he was drugged up, and he'd shoot and play games of killing and stuff. And they would pick on him at school, and he was so angry. Is it not inside you and I merely programs, ideas floating around inside of us, and the language of the soul basically speaks in about 3 to 5 different ways. 3 main ways. First of all, this part of us is so powerful, it can learn something and not know you learned it. Do you realize that most learning does not occur at your conscious level? I mean, granted, you may say, I'm going to learn this, and then you're going to sit here and you're going to try to learn it, but the real, true learnings occur deeper inside you. So inside of us, these programs are residing within us. And these programs, sometimes we never would ever go back to because they hurt. I mean, you would never, and I would never in a million years, go back to those experiences of my father being mean to me, those experiences of being beaten, those experiences of feeling rejected when I'm at school, being stuck in the middle of the class and feeling whatever it is I felt. I would never consciously go back there because why? It hurt. I mean, we would never go back there. But here's the craziest part about it all. If it's in there, it's in there. Does that make sense? So that means wherever you go, guess where it goes? With you. And so this dynamic part of you, I call it the genius within. I call it God. I call it the essence of whatever that is. Because it works on your behalf based on what you've stored inside you. Now, that's the crazy part. What's stored inside of us. You know, I may have shared a story before, but this is a very prominent story in my life. Whenever I was like 17 years old, my buddies and I, we went to the movies, watching movies. And when we left, maybe, 6 weeks later, who knows, a month or 2 later, we load up our van with refreshments. 17, 18 years old, And I was 18. I was legal to buy beer at 18 back then, So here we are. We're going to Fort Cobb. And so we're out having fun, partying, and I thought, well, heck, I'm going to swim across this lake. I ran cross country, wrestled in high school, track, football. Couldn't cross that lake. And about halfway across that lake, all of a sudden the theme of that movie starts to play in my head. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, I can feel it now. Oh, shoot, went right through me. Now, as I'm swimming frantically back to the shore, logically I was thinking, I know there's no sharks. But in my mind, it started to create something else. Well, what about those big catfish? Right? So here it is. I did not even know. I had no idea that I got a fear at the unconscious level. And all of a sudden, in the right scenario, at the right place and time, it started to work on my behalf. Now, I want you to understand, it was working on my behalf. You realize that? Because what did I do? I was watching this show, and definitely you don't want sharks eating you up. But some people can look at that, and when I'm swimming across and get to the shore, I'm thinking, well, I must be screwed up. And then I can't get back in the water. And I remember even years later, in the water, that little thought was back there because it was installed, and I didn't even know it at the unconscious level. See, there's something inside of us working in our behalf. And the only way that we can heal and change the inner self is to discover not only how we internally process and work, we have to figure out how to operate within that system and have a couple beliefs that are really very powerful. and having skills. Does that make sense? So, let's think about it. Your current situation, your current relationship, or even your past relationships.